Hello and welcome. This is Michał and Arek Hajduk, your favorite YouTube show about investing, VCs, startups, everything that's important in Polish and European venture ecosystem. Um, Today we have a guest. The guest will introduce himself in a second, but before a few important messages about our channel. Please remember to support us. Yes, we do it for you, and we expect nothing from you, just that you buy us a coffee from time to time, right? There's a code in the on the screen right now, and you can also support us by ordering supplements from Nikalab, yeah, our sponsors. This is something that supports us, and it could be super beneficial for you too, because you get a nice discount because of our code. Okay,
And
so
don't forget to subscribe and like, obviously, because it
yes,
also
this
it
is
also
this
helps
is
us.
but everyone that watches us already subscribed, I think. But yeah, maybe. Okay, enough of those introductions, like this usual stuff. Let's switch to our guest. We have a foreign guest today, not Polish, and yeah, the episode is in English also. That could be an indication that we have a foreign guest. Okay, let's invite him here. His name is Robin Wauters. I hope I pronounce it properly. Robin, did I pronounce it right?
No, but that's okay.
Oh man, sorry.
I will do my best. Robin Wauters.
Well,
Robin,
yeah, it's
let's
better.
let's
Better.
start with the introductions. Who are you and why you're here?
Well, I'm here because you invited me, and I love going on podcasts. So let's get that out of the way. So my name is Robin Wauters. I'm a European tech observer. I always like to call myself. I used to dabble a bit in journalism. I was a writer for TechCrunch and the Next Web, and I ultimately started my own media company called Tech.eu. So I've been covering the European tech space for quite a while, and then basically transitioned myself into more of an ecosystem builder, more actively participating in things like lobbying or advocating for a better environment for entrepreneurs, investing in startups, etc., etc.
So
What was the moment?
basically, if just to interrupt, basically, if anyone read anything about the European startup scene in the last, I don't know how many years, there's a high chance that it was an article by Robin, right?
There's a few journalists out there, but there's very few. You can count them on one hand that have been actively following the scene for as long as I have. Yeah, but I'm the foreign guest. I'm not Polish yet, but who knows? Maybe one day.
Yeah, but it's
Well,
it's a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank
Arek,
you for
back
the
to your
invite.
question.
Robin, when this shift happened to you, because you said you were observer and now you're kind of participant.
Yep.
So what made it that you wanted to be actively involved?
Yeah. It's not that I never wanted to be actively involved before, but you know the saying, right? Like if you don't have any skills, but you do have an interest in something, then usually you become a journalist, or at least it's one of the options to write about something that's interesting to you, but you can't really do it yourself. I didn't have any technical background. I wasn't much of an entrepreneur. So I ended up just writing about entrepreneurs and startups and innovation ecosystem. And the more I got ingrained in that sort of culture and that ecosystem, and the more I learned about it, the more I had the feeling like, hey, I want to be a more active participant in actually trying to change things for the better. And that kind of led me down a path that I'm still on. But it's also a result of having started Tech.eu, grown it, and then sold it. So I had to make a decision for myself. Like, is there still a future in journalism for me when it comes to covering the tech scene in Europe, or do you want to stay in that tech scene but actually do different things? And the answer for me was a very clear yes. And we can go a bit deeper into why, but that's basically how it happened, very organically.
Okay, so you wear many hats because you're an angel investor. You also entrepreneur after exit, right? Because you sold your own company. You're also heavily involved in EU Inc., which we'll talk about later. Uh, is there anything that you see in the European startup scene that it's that it's the same over those 25 years that you are involved?
Um, I think a lot has changed. So I usually get the question, what has changed? What is still the same? That's a good question. I think we still punch below our weight in the sense that, and this is a cliche, right? Like we have everything that we need in terms of ingredients, like lots of talent, scientific research. We have good talent mobility. We have some degree of capital, especially on the early stage, that we can get started. But for some reason, we still don't manage to scale up our startups to a level that we see in other countries, primarily in the US. So there's a million reasons for why that hasn't really happened, or not to the degree that I would have hoped for. But I think what's still the same is that, and this is getting to the crux of the issue, I think the mindset still has to shift. And I think entrepreneurs are becoming more ambitious, but there's still this level of let's play it safe, let's go slow, let's try a few things instead of thinking and dreaming big from day one. That is something that I think is still largely the same. And there are exceptions to everything and to every rule, but I think largely that's still the case.
Hmm. So speaking about ambition, because it is kind of this mindset, it relates to ambition, right? You come from a very small country of Belgium, right? And you also created or co-created the startups in somehow there. Back in 2013, I believe you created something or co-created something called Belgian Startup Manifesto. Can you tell us what was it and why you created this?
Yeah. So you very correctly pointed out that Belgium is a very small country and a very small ecosystem, in the same way that Europe is actually a small startup ecosystem compared to the rest of the world. So what happens on a Belgian level often mirrors what happens on the European level. And in Belgium, what I saw, and I'm talking now almost 20 years ago, let's say 15 years ago to make me seem less old. But 15 years ago, the ecosystem was still very immature. Sure, there were interesting companies being built, there were interesting entrepreneurs, but in terms of community, like what really makes an ecosystem, there was really not that much there, right? No co-working spaces, no coordination between regions, very few investors, at least professional investors investing into startups. Um, so the Belgian Startup Manifesto was a way for me and other actors in the ecosystem that wanted to change something, is to actually put a few bullet points on, like, what do we actually want to achieve and how can we achieve that? Is it through an association? Is it through events? Is it through like a policy influential organization? Is it starting our investment firm? We looked at all of these things and we said, like, okay, let's at the very least do a manifesto to create some kind of momentum for the ecosystem, and that turned out quite well. But at the end of the day, we very quickly realized that there is a lot more structural things that needed to be done to actually get to that point. And at the time, I was also working as a journalist and starting Tech.eu in 2013, around that time. So I didn't really get all that involved in the development of the Belgian ecosystem, if I'm really honest. But that changed around 5-6 years ago when I really jumped back into that and co-founded Syndicate One, which I guess we can also talk about. But I started investing with a group of people into startups. We started doing events. We started getting involved again on a policy level, etc. So the momentum has been renewed, and the ecosystem is now getting from very immature to a little bit mature. Let's put it that way.
So that means that the manifesto was a success. You got what you wanted, or you're active now and things progressed.
Yeah. Look, I'm going to
On
be
their own.
100% honest. You mentioned this Belgian Startup Manifesto, and I had already forgotten about it. So I don't even know anymore what was exactly in there. But I know that the momentum at the time was, there's really nothing out here. Let's just launch something and see what happens. Now all of these things are happening on a more structural level and in a more structured way. And also with bridges being built across the ecosystem here in Belgium, which is very fragmented on its own. Much like
Mhm.
Europe is
But
fragmented,
were
Belgium is
there
the same.
any like changes on the policy level? I don't know, some laws got changed in the meantime, some more
Um,
investment friendly, I don't know, terms.
Yeah, we did see some change there, but it was not because of the manifesto. That happened a few years after, when there was a more coordinated effort between entrepreneurs and investors across the country.
Funny because you said you don't remember it, and if I'm reading, the summary of the manifesto, basically it's the same stuff that we talk right now. Like, there is talent, but we need to make it easier for new talent to come into to
Yeah.
Belgium, right? Or in Europe, in that case, right? Then what about tax incentives for angel investors, and what about regulation and administration, and red tape for company creation, right? It seems like we talk about startups, and there's more people involved in startups, and probably there is X amount of people that are involved, but it seems like we are still talking about the same stuff.
We are. We are. And that's true on the European level as well. Like it really hasn't changed all that much, even though like the pool of talented entrepreneurs and the pool of interesting companies and the pool of unicorns and the pool of investors, they're all growing, but they're not growing at a rate that we maybe could have achieved if we took it more seriously, or at a rate that if we compare that to the US, for example. So the questions we need to ask ourselves, like, why hasn't that changed as much as it should have or could have? And what needs to happen for this transition now that we have political and entrepreneurial momentum again in Europe? How do you capitalize on that to get to that next level? So that's what I'm working
Mm.
on.
Maybe we're just unhappy about things constantly, right?
We are constantly unhappy about things because, let's be honest, if you're an entrepreneur in Belgium or Europe, it's not an easy path to take. It's not an easy path to take anywhere, but we make it especially hard in Europe. We put up all of these small barriers, even at a very early stage, that it makes it almost not impossible to achieve things, but just a lot more difficult. It's like we're playing on hard mode all the time.
How hard or how easy is to start a tech company in Belgium, or Belgians don't care about it and just incorporate in Estonia or Delaware?
No, it's relatively easy to start a company. It's easy to raise your first investment, and we do have tax incentives for angel investors and seed funds. It's not that we don't have it. It's just that the pool of people that want to start companies and want to start companies with a mindset of I'm going to make this huge and be very ambitious is not big enough. And that starts at a very, granular level. Education, role models, media, events, like all of that has to mature alongside everything else. And that's not always, sometimes these things move at different speeds, or they're not taken for something as important as the other. But in reality, that's what an ecosystem is, right? Like it's a number of elements that make up part of a community, but all of these things need to advance. Corporate services, media, events, all of that kind of falls apart if you don't have the entrepreneurs to start with.
But is it? It's my impression that it's also a lot about culture. That
Yes.
the allowed to to make mistakes, and you are allowed to make mistakes. You are allowed to fail, and it's not in European core to have that. Are
It's
we
not.
doomed?
We're not doomed at all. No, I think we can still play a role, and especially when it comes to things like deep tech or deep science heavy industries and robotics and whatnot. I'm quite hopeful and optimistic about the future of Europe and European tech. Don't get me wrong, but it's just that mindset and that culture that you speak of. It's not something that you change overnight. It's not something that you even change over a generation. It's probably going to take more than that. You can only build more companies and more role models and try to change and influence the education system and the policy side of things to really try and keep up with that change. But that's a constant fight, and it's a fight worth fighting. Don't get me wrong, but it is a fight.
Right.
All right, so that
Uh,
fight maybe okay. Let's get to it. So the initiative, of the EU Inc. Right? That's the fight you probably mean when talking about it. Why?
I mean, it's one fight. There's
Yeah.
plenty more to be fought, but I'll maybe step back a bit and say how EU Inc. sort of came about, which is a group of people that care about Europe and want Europe to succeed, came together and said like, hey, how foolish is it that we still don't have a pan-European company form, right? And basically started thinking and discussing about this, ended up writing a legal paper and launching a website and having this whole community and then the campaign with the hats. But at the very core of it, if you go back to the very beginning, it's a grassroots initiative of people who say like, I don't want to know how policy works and I don't want to make laws, but I want to understand, why don't we have a European company form yet? If we have one in the US and we have something like Delaware Inc., what is the reason that we don't have something like that in the EU? That was the starting point of EU Inc. in the first place, right? Like, how do you get to a point where you at least have something of an equivalent in Europe that you already have in the US, which means a standardized way to start a company, raise investment, and scale, right? And we didn't have that, and we still don't to this day. But at the very least, there was this group of people trying to, at the very least, figure out, like, why isn't it there yet? And to be very clear, this whole notion of having a European company form is not new. I mean, we've tried before. 25 years ago, there was something called Societas Europeana. My Latin is not so good, but it's called SE. It was tried. It failed for the most part. 12, 13 years ago, there was another effort to kind of come up with something similar to EU Inc. No political momentum, lots of pushback from member states, never even got to proposal stage. Now, thanks to EU Inc., but also the efforts of the community, like the entrepreneurs, the investors, and also some policymakers with really good intentions, we got to a stage where at least it's on the table again, but in a very structured way, with a proposal coming from the Commission. And we can dive into that a bit more. But what we've achieved, now that it's failed a few times already, what we've achieved so far is actually quite substantial. Now, how do you take that and actually get it to a level where it's useful and impactful?
On the political level, it sounds like those changes are part of something important for the European Union, and this is one of the points where European leaders are trying to say, yes, we are innovative too, and we will build something great, and this has a name already, and it will be almost as great as the US has it, right? But I'm guess we are still unhappy with that still, right?
Well, you say there is political momentum, and you're not wrong. Like, there are certain member states in the EU, and there's the Commission, and there's departments within the Commission, because it's different DGs, that are actually quite positive about this. We need this change. The community has asked for it. We can do that on a legal basis. Let's get it done. But I guarantee you that there are member states out there, and people, even with member states who have a positive attitude towards EU Inc., who have other interests to protect, right? We're talking taxation, employment, to make sure there's not a race to the bottom. It's, how do you handle insolvency? How do you handle national sovereignty? If EU Inc., if you get to start a company in France, for example, but it's also an EU Inc., what if that company becomes critical to infrastructure or defense or anything like that in the future? So these are legitimate questions that member states are now asking. But it doesn't mean that the political momentum is 100% there to get it done. Not at all. It's a constant daily fight. I'll tell you that.
So we will talk about good and bad sides of Commission's proposal. But first I would like to ask you, we are talking about the regime 28, right? And this is significant number, right? Because we're about to create something that is universal over 27 seven member countries, right? But is it possible to create something having in mind those challenges, right? That every single member country has different rules on everything, right? In US we have federation of states, but they do have similar law. Is it not that it's mission impossible on some level, that this is the best we can get with this setup?
Look, is it mission impossible? No, because we're entrepreneurs and by nature we're very optimistic. If you would have asked 2 years ago to anyone within any member state, like, is it something like EU Inc. that's currently on the table, is that possible? All of them would have told you it's impossible. All of them. So it went from impossible to inevitable very, very quickly. 2 years is nothing for European policymaking process timelines, right? So the fact that we got so far is fantastic, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we can get to the next level. So that's why I'm saying, like, it's a constant fight to get there. But what we've already achieved is quite remarkable. And I'm not saying we with the EU Inc. team only. It's like a community effort, right? Like, it's a joint team effort, if I can call it that. But it doesn't mean we're there yet. And 28 regime, by the way, is harmonization of a lot of things: taxation, insolvency, ESOP, pan-European stock exchange. You could talk about a unified capital market. For the Commission now, 28 regime is all of that. What EU Inc. is actually a small part of that, but it's the basis of everything because it's the start. It's company incorporation. Where do you actually put your seat? Where do you register as a company? What is the standardized template for that registration that another investor, whether they're from another country or your domestic country, where can they understand it? Is it portable? Is it comparable? Is it understandable? Is it a template or a standard that you can actually sell against and maybe even exit your company down the line?
How
It's
would you how would you rate the tech community feelings towards all those initiatives? Do you see support, or people are like, Arek, no, this cannot be done, it's too complicated, let's just register in Delaware?
Look, I think a lot of people within the community and even in our group are quite excited about some of the elements in the proposal. There are some really, really good things in there, right? Like 48-hour incorporation, like no minimum capital requirements. There's good stuff on ESOP in there. So the community in general welcomes these things because they're an improvement, they're an upgrade to what we have. Are they going to fundamentally change the fact that companies at some point will choose Delaware instead of EU Inc.? Probably not, because there are a couple of things that are in the proposal that are not in the proposal that are currently lacking that would make it a standard and a global standard at that. Do you want me to talk about what it is?
Yeah, of course. I mean, what is the top 5 things that you hate about the proposal?
That's the clickbait headline. No, 5 things is maybe too much. I'll single out 3, right? Like it's a regulation, which is good because it means that, if you actually proceed with this, there's not like a Europe at 2 speeds, that you have some form of unanimity, but it's a regulation under Article 114 instead of 352. That's very legal, technical, but that basically
And
means
for people, what it means, yeah.
That basically means you don't require unanimity, but it also means that it's very easy now for member states to question this and to basically go against it and to water it down in the council and parliament. So that's the downside of doing it with this article, is that there's now a whole movement of member states against the proposal, rather than the commission saying you have to adopt the proposal. Does that make sense?
So each member state could mess up with the proposal and change it for themselves or for everyone? Like how messy it can get?
No, so the member states now in the council, which the council is the member states, they basically are going to look at this proposal and share their concerns, share their questions, and share what they're against, right? And the parliament will do the exact same. So the expectation of the community and of the EU Inc. team is that the proposal will get watered down, that some of the good things that are in there will stop being in there. So now the fight becomes, do you keep that proposal from being watered down, or do you want to have a conversation about how ambitious could the proposal have been in the first place?
Yeah, because still, even in the proposal, as far as I understood it, that there is still, you have to go through 27 different legal, systems, right? So it's not helping in a way.
So that was the 3 things that I wanted to mention. Was one, it's a regulation, but probably not the right article. Second one is registries, as you correctly point out. You would have a central point where you can still register a company, but that registration would ultimately trickle down to any of the 27 member states, which at the end of the day doesn't solve the problem of fragmentation. It just complicates it even more. So that's a question that we have shared with the Commission on multiple times, and they're looking into it. But at the same time, the member states and parliament will also look at that and give their own recommendations. And the third
no common registry. Like this is something that,
I mean,
that
in the
we would
proposal, they're
expect.
promising that there would be a central EU registry at some point, but without a clear timeline and without a clear commitment. And it's unclear what's the incentive for these member states to actually agree to an EU central registry if it wasn't explicitly asked for in the proposal or demanded in the proposal. So that's a question that we still are grappling with. And I would say the third is an EU court for dispute resolution, because right now, if you have an EU Inc. and there's any problem, whether it's with shareholder agreements or a problem with your investor, where do you turn to for dispute resolution? You're still going to have to go to your national court for that, because there's no EU court foreseen in the proposal, which means that every 27 member states are going to have their courts interpret these regulations in their own way. And they're going to have differences in the way that they approach the dispute resolutions, which eventually might lead to a situation where you're going to pick, I'm going to start this company in Poland or in Portugal based on how easy it is to do dispute resolution if there's ever a problem. And that's not something you want. You want to be a standard for everyone and everything.
But this happens in the US too. There are there are places with different levels of IP protection based on how courts operate there, and this is like taken for granted. Like people say, okay, let's register, let's take this case to Texas or somewhere because this is easier to defend or to
Yeah.
attack there. Yeah, so this isn't inherently bad, maybe. And I
Yeah. I
understand
mean,
that the member states hate, giving the part of sovereignty to some external court. This is scary for them, right?
yeah. No, I get that. But keep in mind that the United States are, per definition, a federal union. Of course, there is state level and there's some jurisdiction shopping, but you cannot do that for everything. So you cannot just choose any court for whatever reason, even in the US. So that's not really comparable, in my opinion.
Okay. One thing that's also in the proposal, it's not limited to startups, right? I mean,
Yes.
is it significant?
Yes, that's a very good point. We fought really hard to have a EU Inc. or a 28 regime for all companies and not just startups, because the obvious problem there is, how do you define a startup? And what happens if a startup becomes a scale up or a big company? Where's the tipping point? When are you a startup and when are you not a startup? That's not a discussion or a definition that you want to leave to the EU institutions at all. Because one, that evolves over time. Two, there should never be a central point where they can decide that's a startup and that's not a startup. And three, you know this very well, that ecosystems in Europe move at different speeds. What's considered a young startup in UK is very different to what's considered a very young startup in, let's say, Slovenia, right? So those definitions, per definition, are not equal, right? So we wanted to avoid all of that discussion by not having a discussion at all and saying it's for all companies, and that's in there, which is great.
Okay. I think that now I would switch to your personal, probably feelings, not the proposal itself, but EU Inc. Was a driving force basically behind the whole proposal, the community, as you said, right? Now it's just taken over by politicians. Like, how do you feel about it? Is it a good utilization of the brand and the power of community, or it's like, as politicians do, they take it, they use it for their causes, and we never got what we asked for.
Do they ever call you back and ask for guidance? Or it's off your hands at all?
They actually do. I mean, we had constant discussions with the commissions over multiple months, and also we were briefed on the proposal weeks before, so we can also provide feedback. And some of the things that ended up in the proposal were thanks to those discussions. So I'm not saying they don't listen, but you have to understand that politicians are the ones who make the laws. It's never going to be the entrepreneurs and the community and the scale ups and the investors that are going to make the laws. So you have to work together with these politicians to make sure that they understand this is a problem, this is what we need, this is what we want. To what degree is it legally possible to give us what we want, right? And that's a discussion that we were having on EU Inc. level, is that we were telling the commission very clearly, like, hey, you don't have to take our word for it, but 26,000 entrepreneurs and investors, some of which have started the biggest tech scale-ups in Europe so far, are telling us, like, this is what would change their life drastically. And we would just present that to the commission and say, hey, is there any way that we can get this done? And that eventually led to the EU proposal. But there's mixed feelings there from a personal level as well, because we were asking for something a lot more ambitious than what was ultimately delivered. But what's on the table is also a massive improvement and an upgrade to what we have today. So it's very mixed feelings. On the one hand, we're very happy because things are going to improve for everyone, for sure. And on the other hand, we're not very happy because we very clearly said, you know, this is kind of what the community wants. And the proposal doesn't match that 100%. So it's always this mixed feeling between being happy and unhappy about it. But also, it gives us a reason and incentive to keep going, right? Because now you say politicians, but politicians operate on different levels. First, it was the commission and also the parliament to some degree. And now you have to switch your lobbying efforts to the member state level, where you have to convince heads of states, heads of government, but also the justice ministries within these countries, because they're the ones who make company law possible, or changes to company law possible. You have to talk to those people on the ground on 27 member states, and sometimes also on a regional level. So that's a new effort that we're now helping to coordinate with a number of
So
associations.
how are you doing that? You have like 27 Robins in different countries, pushing the
Yep,
agenda, or
yep, they're all related. No, look, we have our most powerful weapon is the community, right? Like we have 26,000 people who've signed this petition. We have about 52,000 followers on LinkedIn. We have our newsletter subscribers. I mean, it's not a gigantic amount of people, but these are people that are actually building the future, right? They're the startup entrepreneurs, they're the scale-up founders, they're the investors that are actually, financially backing these companies. So they do have some weight in their own countries as well. So we try to mobilize them. We try to make them understand what's going on, and when we try to tell them how they can help make positive change.
which country is the hardest one to
It's too early
convince?
to tell. It's too early to tell because the proposal just came out. So I can imagine that member states have to digest all of that information. It's quite a dense document and it's quite complicated, because company law always is. So I do get the sentiment that you have to take a step back sometimes and look at the proposal in its merit and say, this is what concerns me, this is what we think is really good. So far, we haven't really heard any very strong opinions of any member states, either positive or negative. But I can imagine that they're still weighing the consequences and the pros and cons.
Do you see any difference, between CE and old Europe, if you will, in terms of hunger for change?
It's a fair question to ask, but I don't think it's that straightforward. If you look at a country like Estonia, for example, which would, in any way, shape, or form be considered a small country and a small ecosystem, but they do have some of the most forward-thinking digital policies for the last 20 or 25 years. So for them, an EU Inc. is such an obvious thing to do, but also in many ways even a step back to what they're already doing, that they don't necessarily consider this a massive improvement, right? While a country
Right.
like France, it would make everything so much easier, or Germany for that matter. But then you have to take into account that they have powerful trade unions and notaries and lobbies that you might never have heard of, but that are pushing very much against this and saying this is a race to the bottom, and you're gonna Europeanize my country too much. And so it's the size of the country doesn't really matter that much. It's more where they stand on things like employment law and taxation.
Right. Robin, let's fantasize for a moment. Let's move, 2 3 years probably into the future. Then the next generation proposal. What is the ideal world? What you would like to see in, because you're a realist. I can hear, and you don't feel like everything will be there. But what you would like to see in the next version of the proposal, or in what will be introduced?
Um, so I don't think there's ever going to be a next version of the proposal that will be substantially better than this one. I think now we have to work with what we have. There are things you can do. You can build, for example, a coalition of the willing. It's called enhanced cooperation, where you say, okay, with these 9 member states or more, we're going to do something that's more ambitious than what the Commission actually proposed. And then you get a Europe at 2 speeds when it comes to EU Inc. But that's a right that they have, right? You can build coalitions of the willing within Europe, within legal confines, of course, but you can do something more ambitious already. So that's my hope, that there is going to be enough member states that are seeing this proposal for what it is, a good step in the right direction, but not enough. and that there is this enhanced cooperation between key member states and that we actually get this done. And if they can then show that this has a positive impact on entrepreneurship, job creation, impact in general, then maybe other member states will follow and we get to a point where all 27 member states are more ambitious. But to say like in 2 years from now, we're going to have a different proposal and it's going to be more ambitious, if you don't serve the momentum that we already have in the geopolitical climate that we are in today, then when will it ever happen?
Mm. But looking a bit wider, you said about it before that incorporation is only part of the 28th regime, right? Do you feel that this political climate and this drive to European independence, in terms of what is happening in the world, will it help also in changes on other fronts, like I don't know, like banking system or capital markets, tax regimes?
Um, Tax regimes and employment law, I'm very skeptical. Unified capital market, I'm very positive because I think everybody understands that this needs to happen. And also an exit environment, right? Like a pan-European stock exchange that's actually liquid enough to compete with Nasdaq and NYSE. Those are all things that are on the table. But you need to go further than that. How do you procure as a government, either European or national? How do you procure from startups? How do you help them scale by being a customer and a partner? These are all things that need to happen to make positive change. But I'm very skeptical that member states will suddenly say, hey, taxation, insolvency, ESOP, employment law, let's all make it European and we'll all benefit from that. The world's too complicated and Europe's too complicated for that to happen. So I'm a bit less hopeful when it comes to that. But there is enough momentum to actually change things substantially on the capital front and the exit front, which I'm very hopeful for.
Mm. I wonder because I just read that in your newsletter, which is what, 75,000 subscribers or something like this, so it's a quite quite a reach. You said something, and I'm looking for the quote, but you described Europe as technologically third world, and it was very recently. It was like half a year ago. Why you frame it in that way?
Yeah,
How do
I
you how
don't.
do you feel about it?
I don't think I framed it that way because my list is a curated. My newsletter is a curated list of things that I pick up from elsewhere. So it's probably someone else's quote that was in there. But I don't think we're a technological third world in the sense that we cannot compete. But I think we're a technological third world when you look at the sheer statistics. I mean, there's nothing that you can say that will make Europe look like it's number one or number two when it comes to tech innovation, right? So there's just no fact-based evidence for that. So I'm always happy to be convinced otherwise. But the reality is that we're running behind on that race. So yeah, we need to realize that and then take what we have and actually make it better. But being blind for the problems that we have is not going to help anyone.
Right. So if I'm founder in
Can I ask you guys
yeah,
a question?
sure.
To the degree that how does Poland fit into sort of that narrative of you need to build more innovative Europe or support growth and support the builders? Where does Poland sit?
Poland
Michał, you
is
wanna?
a Poland as a country, like political wise, or what the entrepreneurs are saying. What's
Yeah, just in general, what is there a support for innovation? Is there political
we're pretty.
momentum for something like
I
EU Inc?
think we're pretty famous for having one of the smallest spending on on research in whole Europe, and basically there are a lot of bright people in the country, and the country itself is kind of huge, like with almost 40 million people. Some say pretty bright ones also, and we don't have enough. It doesn't show. It doesn't produce a lot of innovation and a lot of high tech companies out of that. There are some good examples of Polish companies, but I think everyone agrees that it's not enough. and something must change, and no one agrees on what, right? That's something. And some people say that no, we must invest more in education, or we just have to copy whatever from the US, or we should cooperate closely with the European Union, or whatever. And basically there's no no, Arek, is there any like
Um,
common
um,
front?
no, no. On contrary, I will be way more optimistic than Michał right now, probably. Looking at political level, yeah, Michał is right. I mean, I don't feel like we are moving in the right direction. But we use our momentum. For example, closeness to Ukraine and war theater, if you will. It creates huge engine for deep tech, for example, right? And dual use tech, right? We can see that this is a hot subject, and this is something that people don't question, like why do we need more investment in startups, in
But
dual tech
at
startups.
this at the same time, Poland buys arms from the US, and we don't like the safe initiative, right? So that's
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
and Robin, thanks for asking us a question, because there's a saying in Poland, and whenever two Polish people meet, there are three different opinions.
Opinions, and
So
we do have that. And we do have that.
yeah,
But I think just to give you also the perspective, with Michał, we are present on the scene almost 20 years. Like this show had first installments back in 2012, right? Without interviews, but we were just talking to each other about investing in startups. And since then, a lot of happened, but I still feel like we're in this late kindergarten stage, right? Of ecosystem development, and that translates basically to what you were saying, right? I mean, we have on entrepreneurs level and grassroots level, we do a lot of stuff, and a lot of super things are happening, but the higher we go, the less oxygen there is, right? So yeah, and I think we're at this stage, and I'm fairly optimistic, even though I ask you so pessimistic questions, but I feel there is still a lot of years and a lot of work to be done, before us, before we can say that okay, we're on the right place,
Yeah,
basically
super
right now.
interesting. I think Poland is a soft power. Like I think you can really change a lot, both on the European level and within the country, if you do the right things at the right time. And I will also say this: I don't know if you know this, but the person who actually wrote the initial legal proposal from the EU Inc. team is Polish.
Who? Tell us.
She's Iwona Biernat, who now works
Yeah.
with Project Europe, was previously with Entrepreneurs First. But she's the one who basically is the legal mind behind EU Inc., right? And she's still super active. She's also trying to activate a lot of the entrepreneurs and the investors in the country to be more, active on EU Inc. support. So yeah, we have that going for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, we have Ivona on our list to be interviewed on
Oh, she will be
here.
very
So.
opinionated as well.
Oh, perfect. Well, those are the best guests that we like.
Yeah.
Robin, this is the time in our interview that we switch to the three questions that we have for our guests. Those are
Shoot.
the same questions. Michał will start. Quick question, quick answer. This is the stuff that first come to your mind.
okay, so this may touch your investment approach, but maybe not only, because um, what's your unique value proposal as a person? Why people should work with you? Why they should approach you? What in what way you're the greatest person to get in touch with?
I am stupid enough to ask very basic questions that makes founders question their own assumptions.
Okay, that's a great answer. Super.
I don't know anything about anything, so I ask questions and I keep asking questions because I'm genuinely curious, and then people start sometimes to give answers to themselves because I ask those questions.
That
It's almost
sounds
therapeutic.
like a way to knowledge, right? By asking questions.
Yeah. I mean, curiosity is my opinion one of the biggest assets we have as humans. So.
Perfect. The second question concerns your anti-portfolio. You invested in some startups. What was the biggest miss, or you never had a chance to invest in it, and you would like to?
um, so with Syndicate One, we almost invested in a company in the very beginning called Henchman. We didn't do it. It was a stupid thing not to do because it was acquired for about 150 million a year later. So we could have invested at the right time at a good price point and made a nice exit. But that's just one of them. There's probably dozens more. But when you
Okay.
do seed investment, you only know after 5, maybe 10 years that you made a mistake in the first place. So we'll see.
Yeah, we've heard some different answers. Some people know immediately after 24 hours. So
But
you know.
I mean, we as a group, we only invest in Belgian companies. So the pool, like I don't have an anti-portfolio of like very known scale-ups from outside of Belgium. But I'm sure there's going to be some companies that are going to grow into global leaders in their fields that we haven't invested in out of Belgium. So
Okay, so
we'll
your
see.
investments are Belgium limited, right? No, nowhere else.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
This is not one of the three questions, but this is a limitation or opportunity?
No. So I don't actually invest that much as an angel investor, but I'm part of a seed fund that was initially a group of angel investors, right? And our mandate is to invest in Belgian founders wherever they are, whether they're in San Francisco or in Paris or in Warsaw. As long as there's a Belgian link, we invest. So a very seed stage, very early, we go in, and then we try to support wherever we can. That's the mandate.
Right. So the last question, it's
Yes, shoot,
my
sorry.
favorite. My favorite.
Mm.
This is not necessarily about investing or startups or whatever. Just your personal, thoughts. What's the thing that you believe in that most of the people don't believe in? Your contrarian view on the world or something.
Hmm. I think most companies fail because they don't reach product market fit fast enough. Fine. But I think the second reason is founder dynamics. That you start a company with the right people at the right time makes all the difference in the world. And even if you're in the right market and you have a great team and a great product, if you don't have the same strategy and vision and mindset and work ethic than your co founders, then it's going to go wrong almost 90% of the time. And most investors will not say that that's one of their top 5 reasons why companies fail. But from what I've seen, that's almost a guarantee of failure if you don't stay on the same path as a team. Because I know co-founders who genuinely hate each other and genuinely
That could be
don't.
that could be an engine for for innovation, for whatever. Just run away,
Yeah,
run but quickly, right?
sometimes it's good, but I don't know. That's always a red flag, but you don't know these things in advance. And when you invest in seed stage, that's very difficult to gauge because they're usually just starting out. But for scale ups, that matters a lot. I don't know if that was
Exactly.
very contrarian, though. Was it?
I don't know.
Uh,
We'll have to ask many more people about it. Like, I'm always fishing here for some really out of place quotes here.
Yeah.
But so
I
far we didn't have anyone claiming that the earth is flat or something like that. But
Well, I like to eat bananas when they're still green. Does that count?
Oh yeah, that's good. That's a good fiber source then. So it's better to eat them green. So I'm
Oh,
I'm with
damn
you
it.
on this one. Well, Robin, maybe
Most
you're not.
people don't agree.
Maybe you're not a contrarian, but it was a great pleasure to talking to you and getting your perspective on it. I mean, I hope your optimism translates to the real change in the Europe's future, which translates to our future. So
Great. Well,
appreciate all the stuff that you do.
thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the great questions and the great conversation. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was
Thank
fun.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.